Today, we are here to talk about the Gaza Hospital attack that by now you have all heard of. Already, there had been accusations against Israel of ethnic cleansing, of genocide going on in Gaza against the Palestinians because of the relentless airstrikes that Israel had been carrying out. But then everything got worse. An attack on a hospital in Gaza. So this, actually, if you ask me, it could be the one incident that we look back at that was the turning point of the war, both on the ground and in the digital arena. So here's what we know for sure. A hospital in Gaza was bombed. Here's what we know depending on who we listen to. Who did it, the extent of the damage, and the number of casualties. That varies depending on which media you're listening to, where you're getting your information, and which evidence you're believing. So here's how it played out. 7 p.m. local time on Tuesday, Arab media reported that Israel bombed the Al-Ahli Anglican Episcopal Hospital in Gaza. The casualty count was already stated to be hundreds at the time. Immediately blamed the hospital blast, said, based on Hamas reports, that this was an Israeli bombing that hit the hospital. So Israel didn't say anything right away, although we'll get to a little bit of that later, but they launched their own investigation, and on Wednesday morning, the IDF spokesperson held a presentation in which he said beyond a shadow of doubt the blast was due to a misfired rocket aimed at Israel by a Palestinian terrorist group. So Daniel Hagari said the timing of the explosion was exactly when a barrage of rocket fire was launched from Gaza towards southern Israel. And he said that during this rocket alone, 450 rockets fired by Palestinians have landed inside Gaza. He said for several reasons it could not have been an Israeli strike. He said, first of all, it wouldn't even have been a rocket shot down by Israel because Israel doesn't shoot down rockets over Gaza, only over its own territory. And also, the truth is we do know that Hamas has a history of using Palestinians as a human shield, and they have in the past been caught using civilian compounds in nearby places such as hospitals, UN, schools, mosques, restaurants, for its rocket launches. Okay, Hagari, the IDF spokesperson, played a recording of a call that they said is between two Hamas operatives that the IDF has obtained. And the conversation went something like this. I'm telling you, this is the first time we see a missile like this falling, and so that's why we're saying the rocket belongs to Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And the other guy says it's from us, and he said, yeah, it looks like it. They're saying that the shrapnel from the missile is local shrapnel and not Israeli shrapnel. And the other one says it couldn't have found another place to explode. And the first one says they shot it from the cemetery behind the hospital, and it misfired and fell on them. Part of the Israeli investigation was a translocation also of the rockets that were launched versus where this one fell. And if you trace it back from the potential launch point, that it does line up that it was by the cemetery, right by the hospital. He also showed aerial footage that they now have confirming no direct hit of the hospital itself. It was outside the hospital in a parking lot. There was no crater, which is usually the result of an Israeli strike, and there was no damage to the building. Now, Palestinian sources have reported that the audio and the videos are faked by Israel, and they also said that this is the typical Israeli tactic when it is accused of an atrocity. And this is what the Palestinian Observer to the United Nations said. Israel resorts to the usual playbook to attempt to cover up its crime. First, it denies involvement and says that the Palestinians did this to themselves. Then it quietly admits to having perpetuated it, but says that it was not intentional. Then it claims to be investigating the situation while counting on the international community to forget it ever happened. Then, at the next crime, rinse and repeat. Now, yesterday, I attended a press conference hosted at Anglican Church in Jerusalem. The patriarchs and the heads of most Jerusalem churches were present and sat next to Anglican Archbishop Hossam Naum while he talked about the incident.
You know, we stand as heads of churches united together in condemning this dreadful and devastating massacre, and we regard this as a crime against humanity. And we call upon all sides that this war must come to an end. And we have, as heads of churches, issued 2 statements so far asking for an end of violence in the Holy Land, asking people of all goodwill to intervene to stop what is going on in our land. And I hope that also at this very difficult time that human corridor for the people of Gaza, as well as cease of fire, and politicians know what to do, but we have called upon all people just to kind of care for all civilians in our beloved Holy Land.
Tuesday was actually a day of prayer and fasting called by the Christian churches, and he had just come out of the prayer and was suddenly alerted to the fact that their hospital had been bombed. But he didn't place blame. I mean, he was asked specifically who he blames for launching this specific, for this damage at the hospital, and he would not place blame. Here was his answer.
In conclusion, we are not military experts to kind of determine what happened. But I want to tell you something that, like what we know at least, that there are many buildings, there are many houses, there are many places that they're being bombed by airstrikes, Israeli airstrikes. And these are facts. Like, who did this? This is not for us to determine or to give judgment. But I think, let people just see what is happening on the ground. Let people see beyond even the hospital. And we hope that, again, people will come to a conclusion that enough with this war and enough with the lives that have been lost on every side.
You said that there were already a couple of statements from the head of the churches, from the different churches, and rightly so, the violence and the atrocities were condemned. What is missing in all these statements is the name of Hamas. Israel we find in some of the statements, but Hamas we don't. Are you afraid to put the name in order to protect the Christian community living in Gaza?
Afraid, I think, we are not afraid. We are communities that have been here in this land for 2,000 years. We wouldn't be here if we are afraid. It's not about being afraid or being anything. We, as heads of churches, we made it very, very clear that we are against any violence against any civilian or innocent people. And that is our stand. People want to kind of make us make a statement and to put words in our mouth or not put words in our mouth. But what we are saying is quite clear. We are against any violence with any civilian and innocent people, whether on any part of the divide.
So the hospital had received 3 warnings from Israel for 3 days in a row to evacuate. And also other hospitals as well had received those. But it didn't happen on the day of the attack. And so the Archbishop said that in those previous days, damage had already been incurred to the hospital and the diagnostic center, the ultrasound and mammography divisions, and also the newly inaugurated chemotherapy center, which he had been present for to open 2 weeks prior in Gaza. And that was something that had been built along with the Lutheran Church. So he said, don't put words in my mouth, but he did not give a specific answer, or would not place blame. When asked how many casualties of the hospital or at the hospital, he said he can only go by the official count from the the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is 500. And he said people can analyze what they want. The hospital is a sanctuary for people, and what happened there is a crime. The church leader said they are determined to keep their institutions open and to keep their churches open and their hospitals as sanctuaries for the people of Gaza. There are 2 million people in Gaza, 2 million residents of Gaza. 1,000 of them are Christian, more or less. And I asked specifically how they are going through this time, and he said they're going through a very, very difficult situation like any Gazan. They're running out of water, they're running out of electricity, there's a humanitarian crisis developing, and he said that they go through it the same way that any resident there goes through it. Also present at this, sitting right next to Archbishop Naum, was Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the patriarch of the Latin Church here in Jerusalem, the Catholic Church. And only just last month was he actually inaugurated as cardinal. Last week when he gave an interview after Hamas broke into Israel and took now more than 200 hostages, he told reporters that he would exchange himself for Israeli hostages. He said, "I'm ready for an exchange, anything, if this can lead to freedom, to bring the children home, no problem. There is total willingness on my part." Now the question is Israel's investigation right? U.S. President Joe Biden, who was here yesterday in Israel, said, yes, the rocket was launched by, quote, the other team. But the question has to be asked, while truth matters, or, what is true, the damage was already done, whether you're going to believe one or the other. And can I just say here, that is the problem with breaking news, and in the day of armchair journalists, where anybody can report anything, that one thing that people don't learn is that it's better to be right than to be first. This is something that you learn if you go to journalism school. So take this for example. I mean, we're talking about Hamas saying that it was an Israeli attack, but a digital aide to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted almost immediately, Israeli Air Force struck a Hamas terrorist base inside a hospital in Gaza. His post was deleted almost right away, and then he apologized for sharing a Reuters report that falsely stated Israel struck the hospital. So he said in a follow-up tweet, as the Israeli army does not bomb hospitals, I assumed Israel was targeting one of the Hamas bases in Gaza. And this still was against the Israeli investigation, which was yet to have been finished. Israel's leading TV station actually did the same thing, and that's where I heard it first, by the way, where the Arab Affairs reporter on Channel 12 said Israel did it, and the initial reports were already 200 to 300 dead, and now Israel is saying that Israel didn't do it, nor are there that many casualties. But before we get all lathered up about the Israeli narrative, we have to remember that also the Al Jazeera news channel is owned by the Qatari government, and that's a country that harbors and supports the Hamas leaders. So everywhere you look to get your information, it's already coming out biased. Now look, Hamas and Palestinian supporters are not going to drop the accusation and the belief that Israel did it. And Israel supporters are going to go with the Israeli investigation, says that no way would they do it. We don't attack civilians. And it proves the point, it wasn't even a mistake in this case. We didn't do it. But this has already sparked widespread outrage around the world. Protests in Lebanon, in Jordan, Libya, Yemen, Tunisia, Turkey, Morocco, Iran, and even right here in the West Bank. A synagogue was actually burned in Tunisia as well, and Israel is evacuating embassies in Morocco and Egypt. So Israel is going to insist it did not and try to convince world leaders to also make this clear and to stand with them in this. But the battle for information and truth, especially in this digital age, is going to have enormous life and death consequences. The most important thing for us, for all of us, is to be vigilant, to try not to get duped by quick news reports, breaking news, and videos that we see, which could be doctored. We need to pray for wisdom, and we need to have discernment like never before. In any case, We do need to pray for the people who are innocent, who are under bombardment in all places, in all countries, in all lands, and we do need to advocate on their behalf. But truth is an important factor in winning the war for them. Truth is an important factor in saving their lives.